Welcome to Innovation Week. Over the next 3 days, today through Thursday, 10 o'clock Pacific each morning, we've brought together the people and conversations we think matter most right now for teams building in the agent era. Today, together with Charity, our leadership team, and our customers, we're going to cover where the industry is headed, what Honeycomb is building to meet it, and what engineering teams are actually running into as they put AI agents into production. Our engineering and product leaders, Emily and Graham, will give you a first look at the capabilities we're releasing tomorrow. And our marketing and revenue leaders, Julie and Matt, will share an unfiltered take on what's working, what isn't, and what the teams getting it right have in common. Tomorrow, our product and engineering teams will take you inside those capabilities directly. Live demos, real scenarios. And on Thursday, we go deep with our partners to announce our new integration with Amazon Bedrock Agent Core and a new partnership with Embrace. If you want to continue this conversation in person, we hope you'll also join us the following week. On May 20th and 21st, we're hosting OliCon in San Francisco, a community-driven event bringing together engineering leaders and practitioners from Google, Salesforce, Stripe, and more. We'd love to see you there. Now, let's get into today. Over the last couple of years, turns out everything we've learned about building software is being turned upside down. The traditional software development lifecycle used to look like this. And right now, we're bearing witness to all of this collapsing. Many people have said this. One of them is our friend Boris Tain. You'll hear from him and Charity on stage at OliCon next week. With the explosion of capabilities and agents, this first half really becomes a single invocation and expression of intent. And everything after code authorship blurs into one continuous act of validation. Testing, staging, observing, evaluating are no longer separate phases. And everyone is figuring this out for themselves anew. What used to be a clear promotion from non-production environments to production has also gotten blurry. With the level of unpredictability that LLM-backed product experiences introduce, production is now a stage of development. So where does observability fit in? Well, in the old world, we argued that observability was about having the flexibility and speed to check reality in production in order to inform each stage of the development process. Now, it is the foundation of this validation step. Because no matter how the code gets written, your job isn't done until you know that it works. Feedback loops between cause and effect have tightened to almost nothing, which means that this validation step has to also happen at machine speed. And the only thing that can keep up with machine-assisted change is making that software that you're building, or the change that you're driving to the system, legible at scale. There's something uncomfortable about this. The software development lifecycle was a shared discipline. It was a team sport with defined stages and handoffs and conventions. And it wasn't always perfectly executed, but decades of wisdom about building and running software reliably had compounded into a set of industry-wide practices that brought together perspectives from across dev, QA, security, architecture, and ops. What happens to those practices and distinct roles when we collapse the world like this? As an industry, we are figuring out the discipline of working with AI. Building great software has always been a socio-technical problem. Quality is inseparable from team practices, habits, and culture. But agents are part of the team now. And if we don't teach them what we know about quality, what that means, when it matters, for which stakeholders, then those agents can hallucinate. They can optimize locally and create more work than they automate. A huge part of making agents work for us is getting them up to speed on all the things we've never written down about the way that we work. The hard part about building and maintaining socio-technical systems was that the best practices, human parts, the social contracts we have with each other, lived in people's heads and muscle memory. You couldn't package them up. You could only educate your people, document processes, build elite teams, and hope that those best practices were carried out. But today, for the first time, they can be packaged up. The discipline of working with AI, being explicit about intent, defining what good looks like, and encoding your standards, is exactly the discipline that observability has always asked of us. Except now we can automate it, not just preach it. If some of the items on this slide look familiar, they should. They are the same disciplines this industry has been building towards for years. Production excellence, fast feedback loops, shared language across teams. What's changed is that AI makes them non-optional. What we need to be doing right now, as we incorporate agents into our processes, is to teach AI well and arm it with the best practices. Where we capture everything the highest impact members of your team do as a skill. You capture what your agents are doing so that you can steer them and debug them. When your observability tool has an agent embedded in it, an agent that is saturated with the truth of what's happening in production, that agent can carry the best practices, guide investigations, suggest instrumentation patterns, and show its work. The best practices that used to depend on having the right senior engineer in the room or the right stick versus carrot dance can now be embedded in the tool itself. In just a bit, you'll hear from our product and engineering leaders, Graham and Emily, on what we're building into our product to support your teams, both human and agentic. As you listen, think about where you'll draw that new boundary between what can be pulled from process documentation into automation and where to set those new collaboration points. We're not abdicating responsibility to agents. We are taking on a different job that requires the same instincts. When we build the system to build the system, we care about the industry practices around quality, reliability, and accountability. And we need to extend these practices, not discard them. This is our chance to raise the baseline for how our teams operate. And it's a massive level up moment. If you've shipped an agent to production and spent the next 3 days wondering what it's doing and why your costs just tripled, you know this isn't just theoretical, because none of us can hold the whole system in our heads anymore. Arguably, we never should have tried. But now we have to let go of the idea that we can build a mental model and reason our way to correctness before shipping. Design docs, pre-production tests, evals, these are all only point-in-time assertions about what your software should be doing. The only truth about what your software is doing is what it's doing in front of your users live. In what feels like a previous life, we used to say at Honeycomb that nines don't matter if your users aren't happy. Turns out some truths still hold while AI changes everything else. So where does all that rigor go? The energy and the care that we used to pour into unit tests and design docs and very careful refactoring. Well, that rigor goes into production, into being able to rapidly identify when your software isn't behaving within expected bounds, and then investigating, either to adjust your expectations or to reinforce some definitions to bring reality back in line. This also means that the tools that we use to make sense of that more complicated production have to keep up. They have to keep up with the increased volume of code being generated, the increased rate of change in our systems due to AI, with the increased complexity of our systems, and the increased chaos inherent in building on top of non-deterministic dependencies. We're not talking about incremental growth here. The volume of events, the number of ephemeral environments, and the sheer amount of telemetry that agents generate, it is a step change. If you thought you were managing a lot of data before, agents just changed the order of magnitude. We're building for teams trying to wrangle this complexity at scale. Still, the roster just changed. And as much as LinkedIn discourse wants to talk about how agentic solutions are the second coming of electricity, in the end, agents are software. The level of complexity here is new territory for the industry. Agents run in production and affect customers and fail unpredictably in ways they haven't before. But all it means is that they deserve the same rigor or more that we'd apply to any other software. The question we're trying to answer is the same it's always been. What happened with my software, and why isn't it doing what I expect? We are taking all of our beliefs, all of our learnings, all of our philosophy and execution up until this point, and bringing it to bear on this moment in time. Honeycomb was built on the breakthrough idea that a tool that gave both sides of an engineering team, dev and ops, a shared language grounded in what mattered to the business, could be a game changer in how that team talks and works together. Honeycomb exists to close the gap between development and production, regardless of who's developing and who's operating. Our core mission is as important as ever. What's changed is who's on the team, how fast code reaches production, and the stakes when it gets there. To that end, our announcements this week fall into two buckets. The first, observability with AI, making the data you already have in Honeycomb more useful with the help of AI, and making the workflows you already have anchored around observability tooling even faster, more powerful, and easier to get started with. Over the next couple of days, you'll hear about our smarter and more collaborative canvas, plus skills that supercharge your observability stack, making it easier than ever to surface what matters when it matters, so that you can spend less time digging and more time defining the next step. We know that agents love context, and agents need speedy access to set context. Honeycomb offers both at a scale and depth that is unparalleled. Now you get to see what's made possible when agents are unleashed on top. The second bucket is observability for AI. This is about making sure that Honeycomb can handle these different looking shapes of how software runs. We're extending Honeycomb into the agent era and giving you the powers to see exactly what an agent did, which tools it called, what decisions it made, why, and what happened as a result. We intend to define what good looks like here for the entire engineering team to be able to make sense of everything your customers are experiencing. Observability with AI and observability for AI, two investments that reinforce each other. We're taking our deep bench of expertise on managing systems at scale and imbuing the Honeycomb product with as much intelligence as it can handle. Whether you're using our agent to investigate your entire software system or using Honeycomb to investigate your agent's unexpected behavior, we intend to offer each of your engineers a teammate that can keep up, show their work, and be disagreed with. We'll hear in just a bit from Mercury and Mixpanel about how they're adapting to this new world and making sense of this new way of building software. As you hear from Emily, Graham, Julie, and Matt, note how running agents are introducing new patterns and how teams are getting comfortable with those new patterns in order to run fast. So this is the moment we're in. The software development lifecycle has collapsed. Agents are shipping code alongside us. And the simple question of, does it work? More important than ever. I've been talking about why this matters and where the world is headed. Next, Charity is going to take us back to first principles. In a moment when everything seems to be upside down and changing, what are the principles that truly matter? And why should we all be so excited about these changes? She's been thinking about this longer than anyone I know. I think you're going to love what she has to say.
Christine talked about all the shiny new future stuff, and I actually want to take a step back and look at the big picture. I feel like the running joke of 2026 so far has been us rediscovering first principles. Oh, wait. You mean we should have fast feedback loops? Oh, wait. So tests are important, you say. Are you insinuating that we should talk to our users, to each other, over and over again? These are things that have been true all along, but now they're so true. So as we kick off our Innovation Week, I want to take a step back and zoom out. What are we here to do? What are we here to achieve? What is our purpose? And as everything seems to be changing, as every part of the way that we build and understand our software is being given fresh scrutiny, what matters and what doesn't? We're here to build. We're here to create value. We're here to try and make a difference in the world. To start with what matters, right? Always have to start by asking, what are the outcomes that we're aiming for? And then you work backwards from that. Outcomes are the North Star because speed, code quality, features, feature completeness, usability, onboarding, reliability, these are all signifiers of excellence that derive from very specific outcomes. And it's been easy to obscure this in the past because of the complexity of each of our domains. One of the biggest original consequences of that complexity was a carving up of the domain of software into development over here and operations over there. Or if you're reading the software development lifecycle, it's just maintenance. But dev and ops were never supposed to be about these people write code, these people operate it, let alone some kind of like hierarchy where some are good and some are just dead weight. It's a separation of concerns. Everyone builds. Everyone needs to be responsible for what they build, right? And the dev versus ops duality is always going to be with us. I say this as someone who spent many years trying to tear it down, but it's always going to be with us, I realize, because it is about the tension between the need for change and the need for stability. Everyone needs both, and it's encoded in a way that makes this tension legible to organization charts, funding, businesses, priorities. this is a development feedback loop, and it has traditionally looked like this. Build, test, merge, or if we're being honest, it's more build, test, build, test, build, test, build, test, build, test. Okay, it's fine now. Merge. Cool. Where's production? It's not there. It's not there. Developers have historically lived in a cozy, insulated little padded cell of how things should theoretically work. It's a lovely world. I can see how one might want to live there. Their tests, they build, they test for the behaviors that they expect to see to the extent that they can predict them. And then they merge. Their feedback loop starts with intent and it ends when they decide it probably works. Then they merge. Development over. The development loop. And it's all about introducing change into systems. On the other hand, the operational feedback loop is about stability. It's about durable code, durable results. It's about stability and it's about, and you can see how there's a natural tension here. The operational feedback looks like an alarm goes off, you go and look at it, and then you fix it. Alert, observe, fix. And production is a very noisy place. If you are doing tens of millions of requests per second, you can understand why the threshold for what constitutes a threat is quite high. It has to be, or your phone will literally melt in your pocket, right? So the operational feedback loop that defends the health of the system, it gets kicked off when someone complains loudly enough or when a pager goes off. But in order for that to start, it has to literally threaten the integrity of the system. These are two very different loops, don't overlap at all. And neither of them actually connect the dots between the intent over here and the validation over there. That's the loop that actually matters, right? And the loop that matters looks like this. This is the feedback loop of value creation, of developer intent, validation, and learning. If you care about outcomes, this is what you actually care about. What does good mean? What does productivity mean? What does it mean to deliver results faster? Which results? For who? Why? These are muscles, to be honest, that are weak for us, for all of us. These are muscles that are weak for us, but we must build them. Christine talked about how the software development lifecycle is being compressed or collapsed, and how what remains is this: developer intent and validation. Does that look familiar? Like it's our old friend, the value creation loop. It's exactly the same thing. It's developer intent, and then you observe, and then you learn. You build, observe, and learn. We still need change. We still need stability. Some would say more than ever. But this is what is so actually exciting about this moment in time, right? It's that the feedback loop of value creation has never actually been accessible for most teams because it spans these two disciplines. And now it is. But to get there, to hook up these feedback loops that let us move swiftly with confidence, we have to dispense with the fiction that production is somehow disconnected from development. It is not. Production is a stage of development. It always has been. I just want to point that out. Production has always been a stage of development. It's not that you develop and then, it ends and then we go to production. No. It's just that right when your code was ready to be born, you walked away from it and gave it to someone else. Suffice it to say, production is not what happens after you develop. It is actually the only test that ultimately matters. Software engineers are not responsible for creating value in theory. but in reality. And yet in reality, their tools have only ever really validated in theory. Production is nowhere in the loop. There is a yawning gap between the developer loop, which pushes change, and the operational loop, which protects stability. And that gap looks like this. The space between these loops is where most learning goes. And by goes, I mean it gets dropped on the ground. Software engineers are using tools that were handed down from infrastructure teams that are good for infrastructure, and they're not, and operational teams need to keep that threshold high. Nobody's looking at this hole. And this gap costs trillions of dollars worth in like lost productivity and burnout and value that was never captured or understood. Why? The labor of instrumentation and, it's been a very heavy lift. The context switching, and the thing is that AI attacks so many of these fronts at once. It attacks the auto instrumentation. It attacks that you don't have to learn a whole new suite of tools. You can make the feedback loops come to you. The many different ways at once. And the cost is dropping lower every week. And it's becoming too expensive not to change. Because if we do not encode our wisdom into the system, it doesn't exist. There are teams out there, and probably most of our teams, are ones where when there's an outage or an incident, you know, it might take on average, 45 to 60 minutes to restore service, unless one or two particular engineers show up, in which case it regularly takes about 10 or 15 minutes. This is not a good thing. This is a sign that the wisdom that we rely on only lives in a couple of heads instead of it being a trade-off. In the past, it was a trade-off between you've got a fixed pool of engineering cycles. You have to decide whether to allocate that pool to building new features and product for customers or to building the guardrails to help your reliability and your resiliency and your testing and all this stuff. And no surprise, most of those cycles went to the things that actually keep most businesses from succeeding and competing in the market. But that sort of prioritization is flipping because now, if you want to build at the speed of AI, you have to invest in those guardrails in order to do that. And AI is bringing down the cost of doing this. It is becoming accessible for every engineering org. All right, let's say the top 80% of engineering orgs. It's becoming much more accessible. And agents in particular are really forcing this issue because there's no such thing as being able to predict what the agent's going to do in production, write a bunch of tests for it, and ship it. The only way to know is by instrumenting your agents and watching them run. And then, once you see what it does, you can pick the right evals, backport them to your pre-production testing. But this is exactly the opposite of how we've historically done things. But it turns out agents aren't that unfamiliar for us. They need the same thing. They need context. They need speed. They need connective tissue. They need the ability to iterate and explore and follow the trail of breadcrumbs. The ability to follow our code into production and understand it there is what matters. So, what have we learned? What truths about observability do we need to carry forward into the agent era? Your instrumentation is a product decision, not an infrastructure decision. Understanding the intersection of software, infrastructure, users, usage patterns, and data at a moment in time. Every single one of those moments is unique. It will never happen again. So keep your signals packed together, unify against a single rich data source like traces, as rich as you possibly can, because the value of your data increases not only exponentially, but combinatorially with every additional attribute you add. And bring down the DevOps divide. Let developers and agents finally treat production like what it is, the last and by the, the last and most important stage of development. In conclusion, do you know what actually creates feedback loop? It's observability, the cause and the effect. But if you don't observe between them, no loop, no ollie, no loop. And the speed and the quality of your feedback loops depends entirely on the quality, precision, and speed of your observability. Observability that is lossy, laggy, imprecise, lacking in detail, doesn't let you learn from the software that you should. That's why I know we have a lot of big, ambitious AI goals over the next few weeks, months, years. I'm sure you do too. Every single change that we want to make, every single goal that we have set for ourselves will only be as good, as fast, as precise as the feedback loops in our socio-technical system. And that starts in an extremely literal way with observability.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I have with us today Austin Prey, an engineering manager at Mixpanel. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me when AI stopped being an experiment at Mixpanel. Was there a specific decision or launch or incident that drove it?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had AI features in Mixpanel for quite a while, and we've been early adopters of things like GitHub Copilot, and we've had these tools available and kind of running around our stack. But July 2025, when we kind of like unleashed Cloud Code on the whole org, that was a huge inflection moment because definitely it was immediately changed the way people work, also how we think about agents in the product, like all that stuff. I think that was like the exact moment when that.
What drove that mandate? Did you have conviction, or was it, this is an experiment, let's see what people do with it?
Yeah, so I mean, again, we're kind of early adopters of just like, AI in your IDE type, tab autocomplete type stuff. And like, my team's in charge of deploying these kind of tools, and our kind of opinion was like, yeah, they're pretty useful. Like, sure, you can make some good use out of this stuff. But once the kind of like headless CLI agents like Cloud Code and stuff like that started coming on the scene, that's kind of like when my ears perked up, and I was like, oh, whoa, this is different. Like this, the fact that you could, I guess, like feed a task to these things and headless, like without you sitting there babysitting and it could go do things, that was kind of like a super interesting thing for both, like, I mean, writing code, building Mixpanel, but also just for like, hey, like people want to do analysis in Mixpanel like this too. So
Did you have success metrics that you were working towards, or an idea of what it would look like if it was wildly successful?
I think like we started pretty modest as far as like we were targeting chores, like like, hey, like if you use these tools well, yeah, maybe like our like little small bugs and stuff like that will be closed quicker. Tickets will be closed quicker, stuff like that. But it's definitely kind of grown from there. I feel like that's July 2025, that was kind of our idea, and now it's grown to the scope of these tools and kind of like the extent to which our engineers are using them has definitely kind of exploded. So.
Do you feel like you had a good way to measure whether something was a chore or a non-chore before you started, or was it much more qualitative?
And definitely, the other thing we were keeping track of for sure was cost, and it was really funny. Like when deploying these tools, I was like, we need to get these tools out now. Like if we're so behind, like holy crap. And then like of course in my head I was like, oh my, it's gonna be. We need to like track costs and stuff like that. I think Honeycomb has a dashboard, like a template for this built in, and I wired it up in 2 seconds and just like, boom, showed it to the exec and like, good enough, sweet. And we just went for it. And I think that's still kind of like one of our sources of truth for just like how much we're spending on agents in the dev process and stuff.
Awesome. I'm glad we were helpful. As the population of your stakeholders increases or diversifies, how have you and your team thought about where to focus, whom to prioritize?
The guardrails bit is has been more most of our time has been spent because you know, like yeah, I mean going back to 2025, like you can imagine like having some kind of like are you sure y/n in a CLI like that used to kind of be good enough. Like maybe a trained engineer would be like, oh yeah, maybe I'll ask someone about this, but you turn the agents loose or whatever, and they might gladly smack that Y button or whatever. So, I mean, just continuing to march towards zero trust and just like really locking things down and kind of stuff like that. Not just the the production stuff, but also even the dev stuff too. Like it's really changed our thinking about implementing guardrails and stuff like that.
Do you have any specific examples of someone that you were the most tickled is now a software engineer through these tools?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my boy AK over in sales engineering, he's always, been building tools and stuff like that. But I feel like this stuff is just like, I mean, the scope of these tools he's building is crazy. And actually, like, the extent to which he's actually able to influence our product process, just because he's talking to customers, building tools, showing us POCs, and then like basically saying like, hey, build this, build this in the product right now. That's been really interesting for sure.
When you think about your team or different levels of sensitivity around an org, you use the term tier 0. Was that language that you all had before? How are you thinking about where it is appropriate to then get AI help to build something out versus AI can touch this versus AI can't touch this?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we definitely have agents writing code that goes into production at from like our UI all the way to our like highly stateful storage systems and stuff like that. And you'll see these. I mean, the usage is kind of stratified. You'll see like maybe those storage folks will use Claude more to like write throwaway analysis scripts, things that would maybe take them like a week to figure out. Now they can figure out in a day. You have UI stuff that's just fully you can sell. People are just kind of sending it, and going for it. So it's definitely a mix there.
Are there things that have had to adjust around processes like on call or making measuring customer impact of changes?
Yeah, like there's been a lot of discussion. Like for instance, I mean, one of the like maybe like a naysayer or someone who's kind of like scared of agentic coding and stuff like that. They might the very first thing that's brought front and center is like, this is scary. People are going to break things. We're not going to be able to review this code properly. Like there's a whole like laundry list of that stuff. And like kind of like where my team stepped in is like, hello, it shouldn't be possible to break this stuff anyway. Like whether if it's an agent or whatever, like if you don't have the proper observability or like guardrails, pre-deploy, post-deploy, all that stuff, then like, like, because this could be broken by an agent. We need to like patch a vulnerability very quickly. Like, we need to confront this problem no matter what. So like, let's just like solve that as a team. So that's kind of like, when people get scared or they need, they're having trouble scaling. That's kind of the discussion where the discussion goes.
Are there ways that you've leveraged automation or agents to help reinforce the guardrails themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so we're a lot of our implementation so far has been kind of like the interactive. You're using Claude Code as a buddy to implement a change. Like now we've kind of got that solved, or I don't know. Like I mean, we have the adoption. Like that's no longer an issue. We are focusing on things like adding agents to people's team. Like when you get paged, it also pages the agent and spikes up a PR or stuff like that. So that's definitely kind of like one direction we're going there.
I mean, one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is as the rate of change increases, how do we help make sure on-call is not painful? Is it adding agents? Is it more automated checks or process reinforcement around shipping code, making sure that it has the right instrumentation put in, which you would think would not be a problem for Honeycomb. And also our people are still people. And the temptation to move fast is there. So that's kind of where I was curious if you had a silver bullet
Yeah,
or piece of advice for us.
it is interesting because like yeah, like so there would be like we would get a page, like maybe a warn level page, and it's one of those things that might fly under the radar. Like if someone just kind of let it slip, I would be like, yeah, whatever. It would take a whole day or two to instrument this properly or whatever. But now, like, it's like, do it. Like we even for CI jobs, we've implemented tracing in some of our like longer running jobs and stuff like that. And stuff like that. Again, it was like we've talked about it. We're like, we really should do this, But now that we have these tools, it's like, just do it. And it's pretty good at doing that stuff, of course, because like it's like OTel, all that kind of stuff is just built in. I guess it's all in the weights or or whatever. So that's been really interesting. Is like, yeah, just being able to get that data that we didn't have before and just not be left wondering. We can just very quickly just get the direct answer and just fix it fundamentally. So
it makes it easier when something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
What has changed about how individual team works day to day, or how your team works with your client team day to day?
Yeah. So one of the I guess one of the positive things is like, I mean, we already had like a pretty like, I don't know, like if you have the skills, if you have the interest, like we don't really like gatekeep parts of the code base or anything like that, but they were kind of necessarily guarded just because people didn't really understand how to work on them. Like for instance, some of the dev infra stuff, like people didn't touch our dev boxes or whatever, just because it's like, I don't really know what's going on here. But now people can just self-serve and they see a problem or something slow and they can just fix it. And it's been both a positive thing because like, for sure, like my customers are just fixing their own bugs and I just review them. Like that's amazing, right? It's also been a little bit of like, whoa, like don't touch that, there's this whole thing going on, please talk to me first type thing. So that there's been a little bit of growing up there, right? Where it's like for instance, just like code owners and stuff like that. Like I think it used to be really like common sense, but now it's like everything's free game except this stuff. Please, you must, get a reviewer here or something.
Well, it seems like such a bigger problem right now with open source, where anyone can put up a PR with help of agents, and it puts a lot more of the burden on the maintainers.
Right.
Open source is tends to be a little bit more defined than inside companies, but the pressure definitely shifts around. Have there been things that you would never have imagined yourself being okay with maintaining?
Totally. Yeah, like, I mean, I can think of a couple examples. Like one of them is just like forking stuff. Like I know like we deploy a lot of open source, tools and stuff like things like the GitHub action runners and stuff like that. And like forking these things would have been just like out of the question. It's like we're using the open source tools to save time. Like we don't want to have to maintain this stuff. But now that like these agent tools are around, it's like, sure, like whatever, like, like we've been able to like, if we see a problem, like fix it ourselves almost immediately, try to upstream, but like if they don't want to upstream it, it doesn't really matter that much. Like that's kind of one example of things that were just like the time involved and just like the effort like wasn't worth it, but now it's like overwhelmingly worth it. And just also just I feel like, I mean, building like nice UIs and just like a fully like, I think we're able to skip to the V2 like very quickly, like with internal tooling.
I like that language.
Yeah, because like before it would just be like, yeah, you can do this. Like there's a CLI over here, whatever. But now we just like, hey, here's a dashboard, and you can just click buttons and it works. Like that's been because a lot of the time the ROI on that stuff just wouldn't work out at all. But now it's like, it's the same effort, so might as well do it.
This is also not for inclusion in the thing, but we are finally releasing dark mode. It's one of those things that has always just like fallen below the line of like, it is not worth spending time going through being meticulous, because now we have agents that can do the visual testing, that can do all the permutations, that can do a lot of the just like the translation to make sure that it is consistent and something, not a human going and hand replacing string values of variables everywhere. Like,
well, and like you think about like, I mean, because Mixpanels had dark mode and stuff like that. And like we had to solve that problem before AI, and it was like having building a linting job for that, because it's not a like, it can be a programmatic thing, but it's like, think of the system you'd have to build for that versus like, hey, can you make sure that when we add a color that there's like a dark mode version? And agent's like, sure, I'll keep that in check.
What does great look like from here? If you're going to describe your ideal state, now that you've got the penetration and the adoption, what does that look like for your team?
I mean, the next step is like, so again, we've got people interactively using these tools, kind of like, collaborating, to automate their individual work tasks or whatever. I definitely want these agents to start, you know, I guess automatically or proactively doing work for people. Again, like when people are paged, when a bug comes in, stuff like that. Spike up a fix. Just I want to when I return to my laptop for a page, like I've already got kind of an attempt at a root cause, like that type of thing. And that's where it's pretty easy to like for interactive sessions and stuff like that. I mean, you have people that have eyes on it, they can give feedback and stuff like that. But then when you have all these agents, like hundreds of GitHub actions running Cloud Code and stuff like that, being able to actually like go through and figure out what they're actually doing and like where they're getting caught up and stuff like that's definitely like something that we don't have a handle on right now, and think you guys are working on. So like that actually, I'm like, thank you.
I'm pretty excited to show you how Honeycomb can help you make sense of what your agents are doing, for sure.
Because like the only idea I have right now is just another agent. Hey, army haiku guys, just go look at the logs and go figure out what your other Claude buddies are doing. It's obviously like expensive and slow, but yeah.
You mentioned coming back from a page and having something to review or having a first attempt at an RCA. It implies to me that you have a line drawn between where you want humans involved and where you want agentic help. How do you define that line today? And do you anticipate that line moving ever?
Yeah, I mean, so, maybe it's my lack of creativity, but like there's so many triggers that happen like in the real world, like something's broken, a bug is filed, like a message appears in a Slack channel. Like those are things that like someone needs to respond to, like it's kind of like an always on thing. So that's kind of where my mind goes as far as like, let's just stick the agents at that and give people back some time or let people multitask better and stuff like that. But yeah, like I can definitely see, and I know like Zoom just released their MCP in Claude recently, and that's kind of got my my brain going because it's like okay, yeah, I'm thinking about this thing of like, pages, work items in linear, like all that stuff. Now I'm like, shoot, like if it's a part of my meetings and like we can basically kick off some stuff based on just like yapping in a Zoom meeting, like that seems kind of interesting. So basically, like I see, the agents are going to become more capable. I'm like betting on that, right? But also just like literally all these tools that we run our work in are also getting connected to these agents, and like, I'm kind of seeing the possibilities kind of spread there. So yeah, it's definitely going to grow for sure.
Is there anything else the world should know about what Mixpanel and engineering is up to?
Yeah, we're hiring big time. So if you want to come work on stuff like this, join Mixpanel. Mixpanel.com/careers.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Christine and Charity just laid out the shift. I want to make it personal for a second. Some of the most senior engineers I respect, people I've worked with for 20 years, were incredibly skeptical a year ago. They said this was fancy autocomplete, a fad. And those same people are now bragging about how many tokens they're burning. One CTO I know just proposed a $250,000 per year budget for their engineers. So what does that mean for Honeycomb? Here's what I'm seeing when I talk to companies. They're investing heavily in AI before production. They're running evals, they're tuning prompts, they're testing frameworks. And the moment those models go into production, they become a black box. It reminds me of software from 10 or 15 years ago. You test in staging, cross your fingers, and wait for a customer to tell you when something was broken. We learned that production is fundamentally different than test. Observability has become the standard. The same evolution is needed now. You're not just observing software written by humans anymore. You're observing agents making decisions, consuming tokens, affecting customers, and the shape of the problem is genuinely different. That's the bet we've been making. Our vision, Honeycomb, is for your human plus agent team. And the new world looks like this. Teams are humans and agents. Observability is everything. Production telemetry, agent traces, Slack threads, tickets, deploys. And how you organize that data determines whether humans and agents can actually learn from each other. The teams using agents to build software are the same teams who need to understand what their agents are doing in production. We're building for them. We're building towards two things that reinforce each other. The first is observability for agents. What your teams are building is changing. If an agent is running in your production environment, making decisions, calling tools, consuming tokens, interacting with customers, You need to see exactly what it did and why. The same rigor you'd apply to any other software. This is a new shape, but the same discipline. The second is observability with AI. How your teams are building and working is changing. Using the intelligence we're building to make Honeycomb itself faster, smarter, and more useful to not just engineering teams, but anyone in your organization. Surfacing what matters before you ask. Encoding the knowledge of your best engineers into tools the whole team and AI can use. And it's worth noting, there are two distinct types of agents your teams are running. Internal agents, the knowledge bots, Slack bots, coding agents like Claude Code or Cursor that your teams use to get work done. And external agents, the ones you're shipping to your own customers, powering experiences your users depend on. Honeycomb needs to serve both, and it does. We've been moving fast. I want to give you a picture of where we've come from because I think it shows the arc clearly. In the last year, we've shipped MCP server integration so AI agents can connect to Honeycomb directly. Canvas, our AI copilot with automated investigations and Slack integration. Anomaly detection, telemetry pipeline, private cloud, Refinery 3.0, and most recently, time series metrics and MCP skills, which act as reusable investigation playbooks. That's a lot of shipping, but the question you should be asking is, so what? Why does any of that matter in the agent era? Everyone's talking about models, which model is better, which agent framework to use, but the quality of your AI's output is bounded by the data it can access, full stop. If your data is fragmented across 3 different tools, your agent gets fragments back. If you've got short retention, it can't see patterns. If you've throttled cardinality to control costs, the correlations aren't there to find. We've been building this foundation for years, not because we knew agents were coming, because we believed connected, high cardinality data was the right way to do observability for humans. It turns out it's also the right way to do it for agents. And every one of those things on the previous slide, MCP, Canvas, metrics, the pipeline work, all of it feeds into the same story. One place, all connected. That's why our AI actually works. Not because we have a better model, because we have better data. So what comes next? Emily's going to take you deep into 3 capabilities we're launching tomorrow. I'll let her walk you through them, but I'll say this. What you're going to see tomorrow is the clearest expression yet of what agent-era observability needs to look like in practice. Not as a concept, as something you can use. Emily, take it away.
Thanks, Graham. We've spent the last several months talking to our customers and to our own engineers who are running AI agents in production right now. And what I keep hearing comes down to these questions that every team is wrestling with. Is it working? Is the agent correct? Are the behaviors appropriate to the context? Can we trust the output? And is it worth it? Is the ROI really there? These aren't abstract concerns. They're the daily reality for any team running production agents. Why? Because what we're building now is different. It's still software, but it's more complicated. Teams can see that something happened, but they just can't see what the agent did, why it made the decision it made, or where things really went sideways. That's the gap we're closing. And today I get to show you the 3 things we're announcing tomorrow that will do exactly that. First, agent timelines. Honeycomb has spent close to a decade doing distributed tracing better than anyone. When a request moves across services, we've always given you the ability to follow it and to see exactly what happened, in what order, across every hop. That's the foundation that makes what I'm about to show you possible. It's all about that unified data store that brings all those pieces together under the hood. AI is moving fast. Agent Timeline takes everything Honeycomb has built around distributed tracing and extends it to this new shape of software. It eliminates that gap between knowing that an agent failed and really understanding why. Rendering multi-agent, multi-trace workflows as a single coherent conversation, connecting LLM calls, tool invocations, and agent handoffs, and showing downstream behavior all in one view. It answers that question, is it working, with real evidence, and it answers, is it worth it, with token usage and cost visibility across LLM models so that you can debug and optimize without having to guess. Tomorrow, you'll hear from Dan and Shashank, who will take you inside this capability and show you what it looks like on a real workload. One of the biggest friction points that we see in any incident is always context switching. You're in Slack, then you're in the dashboard, then you're looking at a query, then you're jumping back to Slack. By the time you've assembled the picture, you've lost 10 minutes and half your mental model. Canvas fixes this. It's a shared surface where agents and humans investigate together. And because it's multiplayer, the whole team sees the same picture at the same time. You can start an investigation from anywhere, from an anomaly detection alert, from a GitHub pull request, from an incident management trigger. Pulling in more context by combining MCP and skills, you can have less context switching, faster answers, and the shared record of what was found and how. Cale and Taylor will talk you through this tomorrow. And third, Canvas skills, now with automatic triggering. Agents are increasingly capable, but they often don't have the context they need to really work reliably and consistently. Skills solve this. They give agents access to procedural knowledge and your company, team, and user-specific context that they can load on demand. Domain expertise, new capabilities, repeatable workflows that become consistent and auditable. You are training the agents now on the team best practices that your human teammates are using. Every engineering organization has a few people who always know exactly where to look when things break. The problem is that that knowledge lives in their heads. You can't package it. You can't scale it. You just have those 3 critical engineers that know how to respond to every incident. Canvas Agent fires automatically when triggers hit or SLOs burn, investigating before you even open your laptop, using the skills that encode what your best engineers already know. That institutional knowledge is now available to everyone on day 1. And we're not stopping there. Coming later this year, skills will get refined, testing against real data and improving automatically, and you'll have a shared skill library for discovery across teams. Tomorrow, Cale will show you how to use skills in your own environment, and Ken is showing how all these features work together on real live production issues. One more thing. We're also announcing our integration with Amazon Bedrock Agent Core, giving teams using AWS a native path to trace, debug, and monitor agent performance in production environments. More on that on day 3 when you hear Matthew talk about our partnerships with AWS and with Embrace for mobile observability. What Graham laid out at the start of this session is real. The SDLC is collapsing. Agents are shipping code alongside your engineers. And the 3 questions your teams are asking, is it working, is it worth it, and can I prove it, are more urgent now than they've ever been before. Everything we're announcing tomorrow is the answer to those questions.
It is great to be here with you guys today. I'm Julie Newman, the Chief Marketing Officer at Honeycomb, and we have Graham back with us, our SVP of Product, and we are now joined by Matt Nelson, our Chief Revenue Officer. And we just heard earlier from Christine and Charity about the larger macro shift that is happening right now. And for this panel, we wanted to really talk about making it real, getting into the real world. You guys are talking to engineering teams every single day. Let's talk a little bit about those real world challenges. What are you seeing in the teams that are tackling these things every single day and are really seeing how they can move their businesses forward?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So I just got back from a trip in Europe and spent some time in London with a bunch of customers that we have over there. We were at AWS Summit, and it was interesting talking to organizations that run the AI gamut of maturity, AI natives to global 2000s that are sort of earlier in their journey. The themes are pretty consistent with what they're sharing about what's happening. The first thing is they're pushing a ton of agents into production, some more than others, but they have agents that are running in production today. Those agents are directly or indirectly impacting their customers. And maybe a great example to share is what's happening with Intercom, with Finn, their AI chatbot. Finn is handling millions of customer conversations across thousands of organizations. And the metric that they really care most about is their resolution rate, which is looking at the number of conversations that complete from when they start to end using their chatbot. And one of the indicators that tells you whether the resolution rate will be successful is the time to first token. And so they're measuring the time it takes to get those first few words back from Finn. And the challenge that they had towards the middle of last year is that resolution rate started degrading and the time to first token was going up significantly, and they didn't really understand why. They knew what was happening, but not why. They brought Honeycomb in largely to help us deeply understand that problem situation. Today, this resolution rate has gone up. It's at the highest level they've ever had it. Their time to first token has dropped below 7 seconds. It's a really successful story, but the problem that Intercom had, that Finn had, is really consistent across all these organizations. They understand what's going on, they don't understand the why. And that's a major problem.
So I'd add one layer to that. The teams that I'm talking to, they're not just missing visibility, they're missing it in a way that surprises them because they thought they had coverage, right? They have an APM, they instrumented their services, they feel like they did the work, and then the agent ships, and they discover that everything they built was designed for a world where you pre-decide what matters, right? You pre-aggregate your data, you pre-build the dashboard, and the model works when the failure is predictable, and unfortunately, agents are not predictable. The specific moment I keep hearing about is when a team tries to answer basic questions, like which tool call failed, why did the LLM actually return this thing versus that? Why was this interaction for an agent 3 times as much as this other one? And they can't answer the question, not because the data doesn't exist somewhere, but because nothing connects the dots. And so every LLM tool call, every invocation, every downstream service hit needs to be a queryable span with context. Most teams don't have that. The ones that do, the ones that went into the agent era with high cardinality, event-based tracing, they're already in place. Those teams are shipping AI features with confidence. And what we're seeing is the other ones are firefighting in the dark.
That firefighting in the dark is such a great explanation, I'm sure, for like really what it feels like for people. So what do you guys think when that happens, when there is unexpected cost overage, something behavior that was unexpected? Like what are these teams reaching for? Like what are they trying to do? What do they want to do?
Yeah.
What do they need to start doing?
Well, to start with, they're reaching for the tools they already have, and that's where they begin, right? And so I think they're reaching for those existing observability or APM tools they have in place. They're trying to use those to understand the signals that are there, and usually what they can find is they can see around the edges. They can see that something has happened. A spike in cost overrun, latency has increased or degraded, so they can answer the what happened. But again, they can't get inside to see why that happened. And that's really the problem, because the tools that they're using were really built off of this premise that you decide in advance what you're going to look at and what will really matter. You're going to create those known knowns or those kind of known potential unknowns into the future. But when that doesn't exist and you have this unexpected situation that's occurred, you don't know really where to go. So you go back into archaeology mode. You start piecing together partial logs from your systems, you're manually correlating different timestamps, you're trying to reconstruct what that agent did to understand what was happening on the inside. And that isn't just happening from these organizations that are shipping AI, product for the first time. These are from top AI organizations struggling with the same thing. You can have excellence in building AI systems and still be flying blind when something goes bump in the night.
I think about it like trying to understand a chess game by looking at each piece individually. And so you can see the board, but you can't see the game. And what's missing is that connected view, right? Every model call, every tool invocation, every handoff and sequence, if you can query that in real time, instead of restructuring it after the fact, you don't see an average of metrics, you get to see the actual thing that happened. And that's where we've built this agentic timeline. What we're trying to do is help teams see for the first time what that multi-agent workflow looks like when they can see the whole flow and pinpoint exactly where it broke. And so the reaction is almost always, we've needed this since the day we shipped the agent. We just didn't know what to ask for. And we've seen some of the largest scale tech companies in early access right now seeing this signal and giving us great feedback that this was a gap they weren't monitoring. It's the sort of shape of software that they're happy to have an answer for now.
Okay, so I want to double click on that. We said they're doing logging, they have dashboards. So why isn't that enough? Why isn't that working for them now? Like, what is it about the shape of agentic software that is breaking those traditional models?
So I'd actually flip this around. Agent observability should accelerate your foundational observability. Traces are actually more important now than ever. And if you've ever had high cardinality traces flowing into a connected data store, you're 80% of the way there. And so if you add in GenAI semantic conventions, if you instrument your tool calls, if you use the same platform to debug your API debugs that your agent uses, you've got the foundation, and the agent era is going to be good. The problem is you can't bolt it on after. And so Duolingo is a good example. So millions of users are interacting with AI tutors. They see the full experience end-to-end in Honeycomb. They see the front end, the back end, the model, and it's all connected. And a standalone LLM tool only sees the agent view. And so when your agent fails because your auth service is down, those tool calls can't see that. We can. And it goes in both directions. So Canvas is our AI investigation workspace. Our customer Nubank has 10 times the users in Honeycomb now because of Canvas. And so product owners, business analysts, people who would have never opened a trace waterfall are asking questions in plain language. We have a large customer that actually caught a real incident before their own systems paged them. And so the same AI that helps you observe your agents is actually making your humans faster too.
It's all of the things that Graham just shared really highlight the problem that traditional observability tools have. They were built for a deterministic world with very clear directions, but that only works if your software behaves the way that it was designed to behave. And as we know now, agents don't behave that way. They are non-deterministic by definition. Every tool call is different. The path that they're following is shaped by what the model determines. And so what breaks today didn't even exist yesterday. So no one saw it coming because no one could have seen it coming. So at the end, APM really isn't broken. It was just built to answer a different question. Did this known thing fail? And the agent era forces us to ask a different set of questions. What does this thing actually do? It's not a feature gap. This is not like something that we're just going to bolt on. This has to be fundamentally a new and different tool.
Last question now. The teams that are getting it right, what are they doing? Do they have a similar tool set? Is it process? Is it just the way that they're approaching the problem? Like, what should engineering leaders that are starting to tackle these problems right now, what do they need to be thinking about and what do they need to be doing?
Yeah, I think the thing that I see is it isn't a common set of tools or even necessarily practices. It's a mindset shift. I think these organizations are making a decision well before they ship that software that observability has to be a prerequisite. It cannot be an afterthought. Because by the time that you realize you need visibility, like it's already too late. That's why you need to start this thing at the very beginning. I think the AI documentation platform Scribe is a great example of an organization that has fundamentally made this shift throughout their entire organization. Today, they put instrumentation as a part of their design phase. Every single piece of code that gets pushed out, it has been built with observability at its core. And they're doing it in part because as they move into this AI era, they recognize that they need to treat every single step an agent takes as a first-class observability event. Not because they know where something's going to break, but because they have no idea where it will break.
Yeah, so every one of those decisions is being made before they ship, right? Observability is a prerequisite, not a follow-up. One of our design partners, pretty large bank building multi-agent systems, told me, I will not allow any agentic system to go into dev unless I have observability. And I need to know what each LLM is doing, and this is back and forth, right? I want to capture every invocation, every tool call, and that's the mindset. So the last thing I'll say is we learned this ourselves from teams building and tuning our own agents for the last few months. And the biggest lesson is honestly humbling. Agents work best when they automate existing workflows and they automate existing experts. And so the goal isn't autonomy for its own sake. It's creating fast feedback loops between the human who notices something is off and the system that learns from it. And so one agent, well observed, connected to a good data, is worth more than a swarm of agents running blind.
Thank you both for sharing these stories from the field. I think they were super illuminating. And as you were saying, Graham, we have OliCon coming up next week. So we're going to have so many more of those types of stories of real customers with real challenges and like those hard-won, battle-tested, real insights from how they are dealing with these environments and these new challenges in the agent era. So we hope to see everybody there next week. We'll have Salesforce, Slack, Stripe, MongoDB, a bunch of great teams sharing those insights. And we also hope to see everyone back tomorrow for a little bit more on what's coming with our big launch this week. Thank you guys both.
Thanks, Julie.